SDG7 across to a wide audience. And well, Dr. John Lovett is chair of global challenges in the University of Leeds and has been running a series of international projects on renewable energy, focusing on capacity building, microgrids, and bioenergy. Together with Dr. Omar Macera, have collaborated on production of a massive open online course on bioenergy, which is on the Future Learn platform and has about 2,000 participants. Thank you so much, John. And
thank you very much indeed for the introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be back here in Morelia again and to work with Omar. As was mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about bioenergy and Sustainable Development Goal 7. And one of the things that I find maybe it's disconcerting about the way that people in developed countries or the richer industrialized countries talk about bioenergy and the Sustainable Development Goals is that there's very much this focus on climate change and the emissions from the burning of fossil fuels. And that doesn't really deal with the problems that are faced by the majority of the world's population in relation to bioenergy and health and their well-being and their access to clean, affordable energy supplies. So if we can just go back one slide here so that I'm here because at the University of Leeds, we have a fellowship program called the Cheney Fellowship, which is supported by an alumni fund. And a couple of years ago, the university asked me if I'd be interested to host a Cheney Fellow, because I had several large projects on renewable energy. So of course my first thought was, great, I can in touch with Omar and we can work together again, and I can continue my relationships with the UNAM campus in Morelia. So we did that, and then of course what happened is that the pandemic came along, and we had quite a lot of money in the grant for reciprocal exchanges, with staff going backwards and forwards and students going from Mexico to Leeds and Leeds to Mexico. And to date, we haven't been able to do any of the reciprocal exchanges, apart from Omar came to Leeds a few weeks ago and gave a very nice talk, and of course here I am here in May. But hopefully we are going to ask for an extension to the grant so that we can have the student exchanges between the two universities. So what I'm going to talk about is, first of all, an overview of climate change and energy, and just to underline this point that SDG7 and bioenergy, it's not really very much about climate change. Climate change as a problem is restricted to a very small number of organizations. And if we want to change climate change, then we need to change the behavior of this small number of organizations and the government policies that are associated with those organizations. It's not about the majority of the world's population. So then I'll talk about Sustainable Development Goals and SDG7 and how energy is underpins a lot of the other Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular bioenergy and health. And if we can get the energy technologies right, then this is really going to change people's livelihoods and their health. Okay, next slide. So, climate change has become this sort of huge shibboleth and it's something that we all have to dance around. Climate change is the defining human development challenge of the 21st century. Failure to respond to that challenge will stall and then reverse international efforts to reduce poverty. The poorest countries and most vulnerable citizens will suffer the earliest and most damaging setbacks, even though we have contributed least to the problem. And that's the key, contributed least to the problem. Next slide. And there's this very famous cartoon that dates back quite a few years now. And it came out, I think, around about 2009, which was the time of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change conference in Copenhagen, the famous one where there was supposed to be this big solution. And I was actually there at the Copenhagen conference. And one of the things that I found really extraordinary were these climate change scientists who do an absolutely fantastic job on the science of climate change. And they were running around saying, you know, the politicians just don't understand the science of climate change. And of course, the reason is that the politicians are actually talking about something completely different. The people who are negotiating in these conferences, they're talking about energy independence, preserving rainforests, sustainability, green jobs, livable cities, renewables, clean water, air, healthy children, and so on. And it's not so much about the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It's about all these other developmental types of issues. And what one is seeing in the change in greenhouse gas concentrations, in the science of climate change, is that's just a symptom of inequalities that are going on in the planet. And what we have to do is to focus on those inequalities and correcting those systematic governance failures, and then the greenhouse gas concentrations will go down. There's very little that we can do to influence the major polluters. You know, that's got to be done at the government level. And I guess what we can do as individuals is that we can try and influence the politicians and the powerful actors to change their behavior. But the real thing about sustainable development goal and bioenergy is that we can make a real difference to the lives of people by changing the technologies. So it's about climate justice. Climate justice links human rights and development to achieve a human-centered approach, safeguarding the rights of the most vulnerable and sharing the burdens and benefits of climate change and its resolution equitably and fairly. It's about equity, it's about fairness. Next slide. So let's have a look at a little bit of that sort of energy inequality. This is a picture of the United States of America at night, and you can see the amount of electricity that's being used here to create light energy, which is being produced at such a large extent that it's going off into outer space and could be recorded by satellites. You know, huge amounts of energy that are being produced to create light energy that's disappearing off into outer space. Next slide. This satellite image, this is focused on Africa, and you can see Europe at the top of the image there, so very similar to the United States, that they're producing huge quantities of light energy from electricity that's being generated, that's going off into outer space. And then look at the contrast there with the continent of Africa. There's a certain amount of light energy being produced in Southern Africa and a few of the larger cities, but the vast majority of the continent is not generating the electricity that's going into the production of light energy that the satellite is picking up. Next slide. Now I'm going to show a series of graphs and maps from the website Our World in Data that really kind of illustrates this the difference in the way that energy is being used and transformed. So along the bottom of this graph here, it starts at the year 1800 and it goes up to the year 2019. And along the bottom there, that's traditional biomass use. And you can see that that hasn't changed over time, whereas the next, the grey area on the graph there, that's coal. The next one up is oil, and the next one up is gas. And you can see with the Industrial Revolution, the massive increase in the use of these fossil fuels. And of course, the burning of these fossil fuels has then led to the increase in greenhouse gas concentrations, and hence the concern about the use of these fossil fuels causing climate change. Slide, and this shows the same thing. 84.3% of global energy comes from fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas, with renewables only contributing a very small amount. So if you want to change the anthropogenic contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, then you've got to control these oil, coal, and gas. And most of the world's population do not contribute to that. It's been driven by a few very large transnational corporations and investment firms. Next. Primary energy consumption, again, to illustrate the inequalities. And you can see there the United States, China has a very large amount of primary energy consumption. And again, Africa has a relatively low amount. And the next slide. And we can see that on a per capita basis, energy use per person. There, Saudi Arabia is coming up as having a very high energy use per person. Norway also has a very high energy use per person, but most of that is from hydropower. But you can see the inequalities here across the different countries in the globe. Next slide. And this is electricity generation, and you can see the difference here in electricity generation between different countries, the United States, India, France, United Kingdom, and Sweden. And that's the production of these clean forms of energy rather than traditional biomass production. The next slide. Per capita electricity consumption, again, just to illustrate the global inequalities, and again, focusing on Africa, the per capita electricity consumption is relatively low. Next slide. Now, when Omar came over to the UK, one of the facilities that we went to visit was the Drax power station, which generates, I think it's about 5 or 6% of the UK's electricity. And formerly, this was a coal-fired power station. It was built on the coal fields in Yorkshire, in England. And then during the 1970s and 1980s, there was a period of industrial unrest, and the coal mining unions were able to, the politicians at the time said that they were able to hold the country to ransom. And as a result, there was a political decision to phase coal out of the energy mix in the UK to prevent this control of organised labour over the energy system. What they did was that they started to import coal rather than have coal being mined in England, and the coal that was brought in, a lot of it was quite dirty coal from brown coal from Australia. That caused a problem with sulfur dioxide pollution and acidification. And eventually Drax was switched over from coal to bioenergy. So now the bioenergy is supplied from forestry operations in the United States. And essentially what's happening here is that it's mimicking the large infrastructure of energy generation and the large amounts of fuel that are required by fossil fuel industry, but simply replacing it with bioenergy. So it doesn't really kind of answer the problems. Next slide. And here we see Omar at Drax. And essentially what they've done here is that they've just taken exactly the same generation infrastructure that they used to use for coal fire and replacing it with biomass. So we're standing here in front of the the pulverization fuel mills. So in the past, that used to be coal that went in there, and the big roller balls going around in there pulverizing the fuel, and the coal has simply been replaced with biomass. And then that, once it's pulverized, that's fed into the furnaces. Next slide. And there's a lot of concern from environmentalists that this shift over to renewable energy and biomass production, although it's trumpeted as being something that is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and this is going to solve this problem or contribute to solving the problem of anthropogenic climate change, so that we can have business as usual, continue to use these large-scale energy generation infrastructures, and just by switching from fossil fuels over to bioenergy, it's going to solve the problem, and we can just carry on with that kind of Brundtland sustainable development of business as usual. But of course, there's a lot of concern from environmentalists that all we're doing is simply replacing one problem with another problem, and the massive harvesting of biomass in the United States and then shipping it over to Drax to burn to generate electricity doesn't really solve anything. Next slide. Now, every now and again, I know I shouldn't do this, but every now and again, I get involved in social media. And you see something that kind of pops up and you think, you know, that is totally wrong. And here's a little conversation that I had on Facebook the other day, where somebody said, yeah, we have power stations, then not those stupid windmills and solar panels that make our countryside and coast a blot on the landscape and hardly produce anything. So I just point, you know, you can't resist it. Let's inject some facts into this discussion. And I used some data from the National Grid website. Electricity came predominantly from renewable energy, 43% of our power coming from a mix of wind, solar, bioenergy, and hydroelectric sources, wind power contributing to 26.1% of the UK's total electricity generation in fourth quarter of 2021. Now, with that 43%, as I mentioned, Drax is a really big producer of electricity in the UK, and that's generated by biomass combustion. So that's quite a big amount of the energy produced, and of course you need to have that base load for electricity generation, because wind and solar, obviously solar is diurnal, and wind only happens when the wind blows. So you need to have quite a sophisticated hybrid energy generation and control systems in order to make all that work. Anyway, the chap on Facebook then replied and said, have you seen the amount of wind farms and solar power field around the country and offshore? It's blotted our country forever. If it gets too windy, then They have to stop the wind farm if there's no wind, they don't work. And we need power stations or power plants in central areas. They are everywhere, these windmills, fields covered with solar panels, dreadful, and all because of 26.1% of electric total waste of money and ruined our country forever. Well, at least he's sort of taken a bit of data on board that they do actually generate electricity, and someone else chips in there. About Drax Power Station, Yorkshire receives a boatload of wood chips a day from Canada. Well, actually it's from the southern United States, and then transported by road to the docks. And they're saying, actually, we need to go back to coal again. And, I had to kind of, you need kind of straight jackets for your fingers when you get into these social media things. And I didn't like to start replying, well, actually, this is all about the argument between our then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and the Miners' Union about labour and the control of energy supply in the country, and that's why we don't have coal-fired power stations. But anyway, so one of the difficulties is that when we're trying to make these technological interventions and changes, the vast majority of people just do not understand what bioenergy is about and what Sustainable Development Goal 7 is about, and the relationship between renewable energy generation and climate change. And these are people of the general public here, totally misrepresenting the arguments. And scientists are just as bad, they don't really kind of look at the thing in its entirety. Next slide. So what is SDG7 really about? Well, here we go. About 1 billion people still live without access to electricity, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Southern Asia. Electricity is a really useful energy carrier. You can have lights, TV, radio. You can power all sorts of machines with it. You can power transport with it. But one thing that we don't need, and as I point out to my students, I don't need to connect my phone to a nuclear power station to charge it up. That most people do not need large generating infrastructure. The reason why we have large generating infrastructure is to power industry like mining, like steel mills, cement factories, these kinds of things. The rest of us, when we're paying into the large scale energy infrastructure, we're essentially subsidizing those industrial activities because we don't need it in our everyday daily use of electricity. Next slide. So here's electricity access in Africa, and again, you can just to show this graphically that most of the continent have a relatively low access to electricity. Bit of a difference there. Southern Africa, you can see that Southern Africa have coal-fired power stations. They also have some nuclear power stations, and they have a national grid as well. But that electricity production system is at the moment completely mired in corruption. So one of the difficulties of having those large grid systems and those centralized generating capacity is that the resources are going through quite small doorways, and that opens the potential for corruption. And in Europe at the moment, we've got a lot of concern about energy prices increasing, and at the same time, these big transnational energy firms are making record profits as the energy prices go up. It's not that can't be classified as corruption in the same way that the South Africa situation is, because of course it's all legal in Europe, but essentially it's the energy markets going through relatively small doorways and enriching a small number of people. Okay, next slide. All right, so Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 altogether, and they range from no poverty at the beginning to partnerships and goals at the number 17 going through hunger, health, quality education, gender equality, clean water sanitation. Number 7, which is what we're talking about today, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure, reduced inequality, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So none of those you can really argue with. You know, if we can get those all to work, then it's absolutely terrific. The Sustainable Development Goals replaced the Millennium Development Goals, and interestingly, in the Millennium Development Goals, energy wasn't there, which was a surprising omission, because it underpins a lot of the other development goals. So here it is. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. It doesn't specify particularly what type of energy, but electricity is a very good energy carrier that can be helped to meet a lot of the other Millennium Development Goals, and as I'll demonstrate, if we can switch to electricity, then that also helps a lot of health problems. Next slide. So let's just run through some of the linkages here between Sustainable Development Goal 7 and some of the other SDGs. So SDG 1 and poverty, so energy obviously is fundamental to livelihoods. It was missing from the Millennium Development Goals. SDG 2, end hunger. Obviously cooking's a big part of that. Then if you've got biogas digesters, that produces a very high quality fertilizer that could be used particularly in peri-urban agriculture, biochar from gasifiers to improve soil, reducing slurry pollution. If you're putting slurry from livestock, peri-urban livestock heating into gasifiers, then that reduces pollution in water. Next slide. SDG 3, ensuring healthy lives. As I'll talk about in a minute, the killer in the kitchens with particulate pollution from traditional biomass burning in the kitchen causes indoor air pollution, and that can lead to 1.6 million deaths per year in developing countries. So solving that is a major goal. SDG 5, achieving gender equality. Well, of course, a lot of the people who are in the kitchen being exposed to indoor air pollution are women and children. Next slide. SDG 8, promoting sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Having forms of energy generation for micro enterprises, lighting for business and education, communication, radio, television, telephone. Next slide. Combating climate change, well, renewable energy generation, solar, wind, hydro, biomass. Most of the people who need energy under SDG 7 are not contributing to anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change. So it's not really that much of an issue with SDG 7. SDG 15, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystem. Well, if you can get your energy feedstock right, then you can reduce deforestation and degradation. And one of the things that we've been working on is what we call energy gardens, where you integrate energy crops into smallholder agriculture, using indigenous plants to maintain biodiversity, and that can then help to reduce deforestation in surrounding areas. Next slide. And SDG7, in terms of global partnership, establishing collaborations and knowledge exchange. So with my own projects, partnerships, I have partnerships with Uganda, Tanzania, Congo, India, and Indonesia. And we'll see when we look at the videos, examples of that partnership with Uganda. And of course, here we are collaborating with Omar and the team at UNAM through the Cheney Fellowship. And what we've been doing to enhance that collaboration is that we've prepared a massive open online course on bioenergy, which Omar and the team contributed to. And as part of the Cheney Fellowship, we included a budget for Spanish translations of the massive open online course. And a Mexican student called Nina, who's been studying at Leeds, has been doing those translations for us. Next slide. So here's our bioenergy course. As I mentioned, with illustrated with that Facebook discussion that I had with those people about renewable energy generation in the UK, there is a huge amount of misinformation out there. And one of the very important roles that we as academics and universities can play is by making sure that information is freely accessible. And I guess about 7 or 8 years ago now, I pioneered the first course that the University of Leeds ran on this massive open online course platform, FutureLearn. And then subsequently, I included some funds for creating a massive open online course on bioenergy on the platform within my projects. And this course has now been seen by nearly 2,000 people have been enrolled on it. We launched it last year at COP26 in Glasgow. And it's terrific. I mean, the people from all over the world were able to access it free of charge to access the course. And I'll show you a video from that in a minute. Next slide. In terms of the people who are involved in this, it was funded by several of our projects. From the Biotechnology and Biological Research Council, a project on the use of water hyacinth for biogas production, UK Aid and the Royal Society funded it as part of our energy capacity building program in Africa. And then I also have a program, research program on microgrids, which is funded by the UK Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. So we're chipping little bits of each of these grants to put into to cover the cost of producing this massive open online course. And each 2-week course costs about £25,000 to produce, and that money goes to the Digital Education Services Leeds, and we have education professionals there who are putting together the courses in a good professional pedagogical way. So we're contributing collaborating in Indonesia with the Resilience Development Initiative and Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, in Uganda with Creek, who you'll see in a minute. We're also working with Kew because of their interests in botany and bioenergy, and Omar co-authored a publication with Kew on plant power, and then also with UNAM and GEO. Next slide. This gives an indication of the content of the course over the 2 weeks. And the first week is on plant power, where we look at the basic principles that are included in the use and transformation of bioenergy. So transformation of the sun's energy to biomass, converting biomass to energy, social issues and biomass, consumption. And then the second week, we get much more into the practical details by looking at case studies on biogas, a case study on oil palm, finding the right bioenergy technologies, and there is a the students can develop their own case study in a role-playing exercise where they consider themselves to be a consultant going to Ugandan village that is looking at the feasibility for bioenergy. Next slide. So here's an example from the social aspects, the killer in the kitchen, and in a minute I'll show you the video that is associated with this step in the massive open online course. Next slide. And this is the assignment that the students can do in the massive open online course, and this is a peer-reviewed assignment. So it's a role-play exercise, and the participants are asked to consider themselves technical advisors working for a Ugandan renewable energy company, energy sustainability, and their task is to go and prepare a feasibility study for introducing renewable bioenergy technologies to a small rural village in Uganda. Next slide. In addition to the massive open online course, we've also been looking at other ways to get information out to the general public, and this is the team in Uganda. The project that I have with them, that's funded by the Royal Society and UK Aid, is solar treatment of biomass for power generation using carbon slurries in hybrid renewable energy systems. And one of the strange benefits of the pandemic was that we weren't able to use the funds that we had in the grant for travel and holding face-to-face conferences, which we'd planned to hold in Uganda. So we ended up with some money left over in the budget, and I had discussions with the team about what we should do with that. We developed a relationship with a film producer called Steve Ayenyi, who has a company called Etonga Media, and the team in Uganda, together with Steve, they made a television drama series called Kampala, which is about a young man who comes from the rural areas into the city, and the drama is all about his trials and tribulations coming into the city. But underneath it is information about renewable energy technologies, and I'll show you a clip of that in a minute. The Uganda team have also produced, together with Steve, a film called Beautiful Ashes. Again, it's a family-based drama about a woman who develops a successful briquette company. And it's illustrating the potential for renewable energy technologies to achieve some of those sustainable development goals in terms of poverty reduction and so on. Next slide. So Sustainable Development Goal 7, ensure universal access to affordable, reliable and modern energy services. And this is really about health, prosperity, equality, sustainability and collaboration. And success needs good research and good collaboration. It's not so much about climate change. As I mentioned at the beginning, if we want to solve the issues with climate change, then we need to focus on large-scale energy generation and infrastructure, and that is controlled by a very small number of actors, transnational companies, very powerful individuals, and they're the people who need to change. In the meantime, what we need to do is to focus on the needs of the millions of people who do not have access to affordable, reliable energy services, and try and do the best we can for them. Okay, thank you. Let's have a look at the videos. So there are two videos. And the first one is about 7 minutes, and that is taken from the Massive Open online course. So it's the Killer in the Kitchen video. Yeah. And I went around the labs here this morning, and it was really interesting to see how similar they were to the labs in Uganda. And it would be great to, particularly at the level of technicians, to get some exchange going so that we can get that knowledge exchange by having internships going backwards and forwards. Okay, let's have a look at the second video. And this is a completely different way of trying to get information across. So we can just hold that for a minute. Okay, so this is a trailer for the TV drama Kampala. So the idea there in the TV drama is that the adventures of that young man, and I assure you they are very dramatic, but then underpinning it is information about renewable energy technologies. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Hi, thank you for your talk. So, and you mentioned this several times during your talk. Basically, bioenergy helps with poverty issues, equality issues, but in terms of pollution, it's the same as fossil fuels, or does it have certain advantages? Basically, if I'm using my truck with diesel versus biodiesel, does it make any difference?
I think really what I'm trying to get across here is that bioenergy is a much more complicated case than fossil fuels. So fossil fuels essentially is bioenergy that's been deposited historically and on a geological time. You dig it up, you burn it, and it releases carbon dioxide and other forms of pollutants. But when you're using bioenergy from current biomass, that current biomass is actually part of an ecological system and nutrient cycles and all sorts of other things. So how you're using that biomass specifically will then relate to the amount of contribution that you would then be making to greenhouse gas emissions. So to take an example that from about 2008, the fuel versus food debate, where intensively produced maize in the United States was used to, and still is used to produce bioethanol, which then goes into petrol. Well, that maize is produced using fertilizers which are grown, which are created using the Hubbard mass process, which is done using fossil fuels. And then, of course, all the whole sort of agri-business process of transport and so on, that uses a lot of fossil fuels as well. So just producing bioethanol to put into your tank is not necessarily going to be a great way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. On the other hand, in Brazil, where you're producing bioethanol from combustion of the gas from sugarcane plantations, then if you look at do a life cycle analysis of that, then that's much more efficient in terms of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So it all depends how you do it, and there are lots and lots of different ways of doing it. I was really kind of stressing that bioenergy climate change discussion, because I find even with the groups that I work with in Nepal or Uganda or whatever, when we're starting to talk about bioenergy, very often when they write the reports themselves, they start out with saying, if we have sustainable bioenergy, it's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I say, guys, you're not producing any greenhouse gas emissions because you don't have these large energy infrastructures in the way that industrialized countries have. But it's so permeated thinking that I think we need to state it again and again, that actually if we're looking at bioenergy and SDG7, we need to be focusing on things other than climate change and recognizing that anthropogenic climate change is a function of inequality of energy access.
Thank you, John, for your talk. It was very interesting. I found very interesting the part that you are showing how to be more creative in the way we promote educational stuff, we can say, so that you can attack misinformation, as you said. But I was wondering, how can bioenergy, I know it's a tough question maybe, but how can bioenergy help to solve the other problems related with inequality and the main issues related with having enough energy, as you said, because we are still having the same world with the same companies that are holding everything, and we still have to be able to move on with the transition. And so I know that education is very important, but what other stuff, what other different activities, or from the point of view of the academic sphere, what can we do to help to solve this issue, like in a more general way?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Those are really good points. It's an old saying, knowledge is power, and the large-scale energy infrastructure controllers have had pretty much a monopoly over the information flow, and they have a very strong influence on what consumers do and the kind of purchases that people make, the way people use power and fossil fuels and so on. And I think one of the things that we have to try and do is to correct that those information asymmetries through things like massive open online courses where people can access high quality, well-referenced information, or by having things like popular TV series, as I demonstrated with Kampala in Uganda. Omar and I have been discussing this as well. You know, in academia, we're very driven by producing scientific papers, and we think it's really wonderful if we have a paper that has, I don't know, 100 citations, and you think, wow, that's just really great. You know, our paper is doing well, and it's in the Scholar Google score, and it contributes to our H index, and that then contributes to our career development. And one of the reasons that I started doing these massive open online courses is that one on bioenergy has now been seen by 2,000 people. My other online courses on institutional economics have been seen by more than 20,000 people each course. And so this is really getting that information out there, and it's being made accessible to people who otherwise would not have access to that type of information. So I think one of the things that we need to do is, obviously we have to keep writing papers and there has to be good science and so on. But I think the academic system needs to change as well, that we need to be able to we need to be given the time and the resources to produce the information content to try and correct these information asymmetries, so that we can actually speak truthfully and with purpose when we're talking about benefiting the majority of the world's population with something like bioenergy technologies and bioenergy use.
May I again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
To what extent, perhaps in the past, compared to the future, maybe it has changed, does production of biofuels drive deforestation in tropical countries?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When I was working in Tanzania during the 1980s, there was a lot of discussion about people cutting down wood, and this was causing deforestation. I think what it does do is it changes the quality of the ecosystems. So particularly near roads, old growth woodland was cut down to produce charcoal, which was then taken into cities. And so those, I remember when I first went to Tanzania in the 1970s, you go on the road and there are all these wonderful big trees in the woodlands. And if you go there now, they've now gone. And that's being driven particularly by energy demand in the cities. So I think it is a real contributor to deforestation, and there have been studies that have been done on the effect of very rapid and massive urban growth in developing countries, and the cities don't have good renewable energy supplies, and so they're being supplied particularly by charcoal for cooking, and that's causing deforestation in the area around. So it is a big driver, but not quite the same way that I think people were really talking about in the 1980s. So certainly, I think by having good bioenergy technologies in households, that's going to reduce the amount of biomass that's produced. And the other, the biomass that's been taken from natural systems. The other thing is to have systems whereby the biomass for energy production is being produced on a good commercial scale, and very often that's to do with transport costs to get that into peri-urban and urban situations, so that people can have access to charcoal that is produced by managed systems rather than unmanaged systems.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of the industrial production of biofuels and cutting down large areas of forest to have, I don't know, soy or whatever you use for biomass production.
Oh,
fuels.
yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, soy is what's called a flex crop. So you can switch it between food, and particularly livestock food, or to biodiesel production. What's been happening over the last few years, because the global financial interest rates have been very low, then there's been quite a lot of money that's been kind of roaming around the globe looking for places to find a home. And one of the homes it's found is flex crops like soya. So there will be, there's been large scale financial investments in deforestation for growing soya. So yeah, that's a problem. And again, we're back to large transnational interests controlling those agricultural products. So I don't know the numbers offhand. It's 5 or 6 large transnational companies are controlling the movement of those kinds of agricultural products around the world, and they've got very powerful political influence. So they can control the subsidies going in and the market prices. So that's what's happening. You know, it's not kind of smallholder farmers that are doing it.
Okay.
I think it was Omar first, and then Omar, you had your hand up first.
Okay. Well, we have here at this institute, we have a program, and we're interested in outreach. And so why don't you explain a little bit more about how do you produce this type of courses? And because, you know, bioenergy here is an example, but as you said, you have this on institutional economics, and here we could produce something on biodiversity, like, for example, several of our researchers work on this or different aspects, no? And particularly because of the impact, no, that these courses have. But what type of team and what type of resources and timing you need to produce one of these courses?
Yeah, when I was first asked to produce an online course 7 or 8 years ago now, the leads have just joined up. Tutor had just become creative, leads have joined up to it. I thought, well, you know, I've been teaching institutional economics for 25 or 30 years. This is just going to be so easy. But it's not. You have to reduce an hour-long lecture to 5 minutes, because people won't watch an hour-long lecture on a video. You've got to get it down to, you know, under 5 minutes. That one killer in the kitchen, it was, I think, 6.5 minutes long. That's still quite long for this type of course. So you've got to be able to really make sure that the information that is going in there is the right kind of information. That's where you've got to work with professional digital education producers who really know what they're doing. The way that it's done, as I mentioned, each one of those 2-week courses costs about £25,000, and that goes to the digital education service, and then they allocate the video producers, the people who are editing the podcast, the people. I write the raw text, and then somebody then edits that into the form that's then going to be going onto the website, and they check all the way that the linkages are going through the course, so you get reiteration of key themes and so on from beginning to end. I think I sent you the content of the microgrid one recently. So 1 week of that microgrid course is 100 pages of content. Okay. So it's quite a lot of work, and that always misses the deadlines, and the production crews are sitting there waiting, you know, plenty of content. So it does require quite quite a substantial input. At Leeds, when I first started doing it, there were like 2 people in the digital education service. Now I think it's got staff of around 70.
Wow.
And again, the pandemic has really shifted things, because I use those massive open online courses as the basis for my classroom teaching. And I say to the students, go and watch the massive open online course in your own time. And when we're face to face, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the content, because that's what we can do face to face. We can have a discussion. In the old days, before digital education services, then the only way to get content across to an audience was to have a lecture. You don't need to do that any longer. You know, you can have different ways of doing it. And the really valuable thing that you can have in face-to-face is to have a discussion rather than a lecture. So I think it's not only getting this stuff out to a wider audience, a global audience, to people who don't have access to education, but it's also using it within our own academic environment so that we can have what's called active participatory learning. And that's just a much better way of learning.
I think you said that most part of the energy that is produced is used for industry and not for like people in general. And so I want to ask, in your opinion, what do you think would be a more sustainable alternative for the energy industries need?
Well, I think there you have to have a look at the whole thing, what's going on with industries. And if you want steel, then you need smelters. If you want concrete, then you need factories that produce cement. That is a much, it's a different kind of question and to do with the whole issue of supply chains and the use of large-scale technology in society as a whole. If you ask Omar, maybe Omar's got some thoughts on that. But the point I'm really trying to make is that if we're thinking about bioenergy, is that we shouldn't really be thinking about bioenergy as a way of somehow magically replacing fossil fuels in large-scale energy infrastructure. Because if you do that, you're just shifting a problem to a different place. And you need to think kind of much more intelligently, in terms of having smarter energy systems and thinking, okay, where is bioenergy really useful? And when we had the project in Nepal on energy gardens, what we were looking for there is indigenous plant species that produced oil seeds, so that oil could then be used to power irrigation pumps for farmers who were living in remote areas in the mountains. So what the farmers could do is that they could grow the oil seeds on their smallholder farms, they could harvest those, and then they could use them to power their irrigation pumps. And irrigation is one of the main ways that you can improve smallholder agricultural productivity. The alternative would be to extract oil from Saudi Arabia, put it in a big tanker. That tanker goes to India, where it's then refined, and then it goes in tankers up to Kathmandu. It's then offloaded into Delhi's and put into the back of a four-wheel drive vehicle, which then drives up to the mountain, and then it's given to the smallholder farmer, who then puts it in his irrigation pump. So it just makes a lot more sense for him to grow it. But it's not replacing the large-scale energy infrastructure. It's just generating energy in the form where it's needed by people who can then convert it into improvements of livelihoods and health and so on.
Nobody has more questions? Okay, with this we finish. Thank you very much for the Presentation, John? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Good talk, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
very
very
much.
similar to what, what we